Amanda Taylor was waiting for her due date without much excitement. Unlike most pregnant women, she was in no hurry to become a mother and believed that it was important to get to live for yourself first. But we're talking about children, dear. Just imagine that soon we'll have a little baby in our house. It's like a miracle, her fiancé Michael said with tenderness in his voice. Yeah, well, that's some miracle. You may be excited for it, but this miracle will cost me my future and my sleep, Amanda said, irritated. It just so happened that the couple haven't gotten around to getting married yet, so they weren't officially husband and wife. It wasn't Michael's fault, though. The reason why they hadn't gotten married was the fact that Amanda wanted to have a big wedding, and as we all know, it costs a lot. Michael, on the other hand, didn't care about it and would have been happy to have a small wedding ceremony with just the closest of their friends. But there was no convincing Amanda. Thus, the young people didn't get married yet and were planning to do it when they could afford the kind of ceremony that the bride really wanted. Amanda wasn't feeling well throughout the pregnancy. According to the woman, she had morning sickness and felt dizzy 24 hours a day. But that wasn't really the case. Anyone who knew Amanda well knew of the woman's tendency to overreact and her knack for drawing attention to herself. And now, fearing that she might have to go into premature labor, Amanda decided to go to the hospital 2 weeks before her due date. All this time, Michael tried to support his beloved fiancée as best he could, but no matter what he did, she was always in a bad mood. The hospital staff clearly disapproved of the patient's behavior, who couldn't keep calm even for an hour. But none of them could have even imagined what was happen after Amanda gave birth to her baby girl. At first, the woman behaved like every new mother usually does. She breastfed little Sally, changed her diapers, and wiped her delicate skin with the damp cloth. At some point, it even seemed that Amanda's motherly feelings had awakened. A small mole above the upper lip, sparse, fluff-like hairs, and tiny little hands holding on to the mother's finger. It couldn't leave anyone indifferent. Amanda was no exception. However, when the young mother learned that her baby had a congenital disease, which meant that she could develop a limp later on in life, she felt very uncomfortable about it. What do you mean, a limp? So what am I supposed to do, raise a defective child? Amanda claimed indignantly. But that's your daughter. How can you even say something like that about your own child? The on-call nurse replied. Unfortunately, the woman was no longer listening to the nurse, because her mind was already painting her picture of her limping daughter and how all of her acquaintances would be pointing fingers at her. No, I don't need this. I'm not ready to ruin my life. Everyone in town knows me. I don't want to become a laughingstock, Amanda said in a conversation with her mother. Mrs. Taylor had long been accustomed to her daughter's antics and preferred not to argue with her, trying to maintain her own peace of mind. Of course, her indifference and indecision were partially responsible for what happened later. It didn't take Amanda a long time to make up her mind, and by the time she was getting discharged, she had already made a decision that shocked the medical staff. How can you abandon your own child? And for what? For maybe developing a limp? The doctor was indignant. But Amanda was so used to always doing whatever she wanted that there was no changing her mind. Michael had an extremely negative reaction to what her fiancé decided to do, but what the man couldn't have known was that very soon she'd do the same thing to him, leaving him just as easily. And she'd do it in the most shameless and vile way too. As if deliberately trying to hurt Michael, Amanda broke off their engagement and turned her attention to another man who seemed to be more promising since he came from a wealthy family. Why do I need this poor working-class man in my life? I don't think that I could ever be happy with the person who criticizes everything I do, Amanda told her mother. Amanda chose a very far-fetched reason to break up with Michael, but in fact, it wasn't his fault at all. Amanda simply didn't like getting criticized, even though Michael only did it to protect his newborn child. Snorting viciously, Amanda didn't hesitate to put an end to their relationship that made her show her true colors. Michael never felt so bad in his entire life. He felt as if his heart had literally broken. At some point, the man even started drinking, as he simply couldn't handle the heartache. However, Michael realized that alcohol wasn't going to help him, and having pulled himself together, managed to find the strength to live on. Living in different parts of the city, Amanda and Michael managed to avoid seeing each other for several years, which did wonders for the man's state of mind. During all this time, Amanda never once thought about her daughter, whom she abandoned in the hospital 7 years ago. The woman was sure that Sally would end up in an orphanage with all the other kids who had no parents for one reason or another. Having made such a fateful decision 7 years ago, Amanda turned her attention to her personal life, which soon changed completely. Since she didn't regret breaking up with Michael and didn't need time to heal, 6 months later she was already involved with another man. Robert came from a family of influential businessmen who made their fortune in real estate. Seeing the potential advantage of marrying into the family, Amanda did everything possible to get Robert to propose. At that point, the young beauty had no way of knowing what kind of surprise fate had in store for her, and that it would come with the effect of a cold shower and bring her back to reality. The first year of marriage seemed like a dream come true. Amanda's life was full of luxury. Virtually any wish of the young wife was fulfilled, as if by magic. Amanda felt that she'd really found the very happiness she'd been dreaming of for so long. But it all changed one day when Robert announced that he needed an heir. Amanda tried to argue and change the topic of the conversation, but the businessman stubbornly continued to insist on it. The most shocking news, however, came later. After several unsuccessful attempts to get pregnant, Amanda learned that she could no longer have children. It was then that the woman realized her mistake. Now, Amanda could live for her own pleasure without even caring about her figure. She could spend all the money on herself and enjoy everyone's attention. But for some reason, that didn't bring her as much joy as she expected. She saw the disappointment in Robert's eyes. The man wanted to have an heir way more than he wanted his extravagant wife. The couple's inability to have children caused many fights between them. They were mostly initiated by Robert, who no longer looked at his wife the way he used to. There was no more love in his eyes, which used to make Amanda want to scream with happiness. Everything was completely different now. Sensing that they were on the verge of getting divorced, Amanda regretfully recalled the time when she lived with Michael. "This must be my punishment for abandoning my own daughter," Amanda thought with a sob. But despite feeling miserable over it, Amanda was still in no hurry to try to get her daughter back. During all this time, she never once felt the need to make inquiries about her daughter's life. Amanda probably didn't want to see the condemnation in the eyes of the orphanage staff, as she had no doubt that they would all see her as the terrible human being for abandoning her own daughter. The situation was aggravated by the fact that Robert's father had died quite recently, and he was the one who'd been fully supporting Robert all of his life. Because of this, the family's income decreased significantly, which couldn't but affect Amanda's standard of living. Now she had to do her own shopping and even buy discounted furniture. Previously, all the work around the house was done by the hired help, but now Amanda had to take care of everything on her own. One day, Amanda met Michael at one of the stores. Her ex-fiance was holding the hand of a 7-year-old girl who was chatting incessantly and looking at her dad with loving eyes. Amanda took a closer look at the girl and shuddered. "No, this can't be happening," the woman whispered, unwilling to believe her eyes. The fact was that the little girl had a mole above her upper lip, which looked exactly like the one her daughter Sally had. "God, no! Did Michael really decide to do it? But what about the limp and all that?" the woman was thinking frantically. Meanwhile, Michael caught up with Amanda, and having recognized her, gave her a reserved nod. If Amanda hadn't stopped her ex-fiance, he would have probably kept going, but the woman simply couldn't handle her curiosity. She had to find out the truth. "Hi, Michael. Your daughter is beautiful," she began cautiously. The ex-fiance gave Amanda an appraising look, then smiled at her and said, "Yes, you're right. Sally is my daughter, and she is beautiful," Michael said, putting an emphasis on the last word. The man's answer made Amanda freeze. In the depths of her soul, she was still hoping that the mole above the girl's lip was just a coincidence, but the truth turned out to be too cruel. As it turned out later, after their painful breakup 7 years ago, Michael didn't give up on his daughter, and having dealt with all of the paperwork, he got Sally back from the orphanage. Knowing that his daughter was at risk of developing a limp, he did everything he could to prevent it from happening. Massage sessions and various courses of physical therapy in the best health resorts in the world did their job, and by the age of 7, there was no sign of a limp. Looking at the happy face of her daughter, Amanda couldn't hold back her tears. The woman really wanted to come up and hug her, but Michael shook his head, letting her know that her attention wasn't welcome. And then Amanda saw Michael's wife and realized that it really was all over. They were a wonderful, beautiful family that turned people's heads on the street. It took Amanda a long time to recover from her run-in with Michael at the store. Left with nothing, she was ready to give up all of the wealth in the world in order to rewind time and get Michael and Sally back. But on the other hand, she understood perfectly well that she'd made her own bed, and all that was left to do was lay in it. Meanwhile, Michael was walking down the street with his beloved wife and daughter, and was feeling proud that 7 years ago, he wasn't afraid of the potential difficulties and accepted fate's challenge, which gave him a chance to find the long-awaited family happiness.